your pickle.
Who disrupts my coronation?
Everyone has been destroyed because of this freak. I won't allow it! These babies just saved this lame fest party!
What's going on? You are listening to This Week in Geek.net, and I'm your host, Mike the Birdman. Welcome to the first interview of 2026. But I promise you, it's a good one because this year has begun in a rough state, we'll say. But I'm here to talk about something really exciting that I've had a chance to take a look at over the last little while. Now, as you guys know, I work with a variety of interesting people. Some of them work in the TTRPG industry on a variety of properties. And one of those people that I happen to know is our good friend Aaron Pollyea, who works with us over on Future Imperfect, but him and his wife, Darlene, work on Earth versus Soup, which is our kind of 1950s, 60s, 70s weird movie podcast, basically campy classics. And that's kind of where we're going to be leading into today. So Aaron and his friend Al Spader, who's one of the other writers who I work with over at Modifius on Star Trek Adventures, these guys created something that originally began as like a minis game with like flying saucers and everything. So stuff you'd see during like the 1940s and 50s and 60s, all sorts of classic sci-fi stuff. So I'm not much of a minis war game that doesn't involve PPCs and autocannon, so Battletech. But when I found out these guys were doing a role-playing game, well, I was interested before, but now you have my attention. So they sent over their game from the Yellow Hand, and this is Redacted. This is the Saucer Squadron role-playing game. So think of this as, what if the Roswell crash of 1947... And believe me, guys, I could get into the weeds with this because I'm really that friggin' weird. What if that was real? So these guys developed a whole lore based upon a lot of research, experiences that have been chronicled throughout the decades, and they turned it into this awesome tabletop role-playing game. So if you've ever wanted to fight giant mutated termites going through the Hoover Dam, you want to fight the Greys, although they're the good guys, technically, and there's all sorts of other weird stuff. So without any further ado, I welcome Aaron Pollyea and Al Spader to thisweekingeek.net.
Hey there.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, guys, it is exciting to talk about new role-playing games, and especially because this is one, I don't know if I would call this historical, because I guess that all depends on who you ask, but I love the idea behind the source material. So I'm going to let you guys just kind of rap and riff on this. Where did the inspiration come for this, and what was involved in the research? Because obviously when it comes to UFO lore, there is so much out there. So take it away, guys.
I can probably start. Basically, I had an idea for this setting more than 10 years ago, let's say closer to 15 now, of this retro futuristic, but still grounded heavily in reality world where aliens and monsters and ghosts and anything that was strange was really happening. But the governments of the world, at least the ones that had an atomic program at the time, had a stake in trying to cover up. And that's the Saucer Squadron universe. And I started by putting together like notes on the world, like the big events that would happen. And then I thought, oh, I'm just going to make a minis game out of it, because at the time, all I was really doing was Battletech or I hadn't really done a whole lot for role-playing game design or writing. So I was just going to design my own minis game based on it and just keep all the lore. And then Al, you came to me and said, hey, this is really cool. Let's turn it into a role-playing game. And we just use the exact same setting. It is just a different focus. So Saucer Squadron, the miniatures game, focuses on space combat and everything that was happening in space with like fleets of saucers. And Redacted focuses on the agents on the ground trying to protect humanity against the alien scum that's invading or trying to disrupt human operations, things like that.
So, and I know, like you had mentioned the historical aspect, and one of the things that we set forth is all of history has actually still happened. There's just this shadow history that's been happening in the background that your characters that you play in the role-playing game have been working to cover up and keep away from the public in general. So, if there's a weird historical event, maybe it had something to do with aliens pushing people in the right position or manipulating folks or whatever. So Aaron has basically looked at all of these major world events and kind of created this shadow history behind them that revolve around the aliens that have started to interact with Earthlings.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about your game here, especially in how it's kind of laid out, you guys, like I said, you give this historical timeline, like from the beginning of the Second World War, major events talking about the Reticulans, aka the Greys, are following people above like the Battle of Britain, the Battle of Los Angeles, stuff like that. And like you guys openly say, yes, aliens were involved. Both sides saw them. You even mention how Germany had involvement with a race called the Space Brothers and stuff like that. And obviously, if you've followed weird history, we shall say, there's always been talk about the Nazis having like a UFO program and all sorts of weird occult and strange stuff, we'll say. And I'm thinking that's really neat. And then as things move on post-atomic age, the Reticulans say, okay, cool. We're real. Thanks for saving us. But now we got to talk. And I love how you've approached this from a diplomacy angle, because when the Soviets developed their atomic program, the Reticulans say, look, we've got the stuff. We're going to give it to them too. So everybody's on the same page. And I love that idea, how everybody's in on it. And you guys have set out this piece of lore, and I think it's called the Tri-Unity Treaty.
Trilateral Treaty.
Yeah. I think that is such an interesting concept. Please explain that.
The Trilateral Treaty is, originally, it's just the treaty between the Reticulans, the United States, and the Soviets. And it spells out the rules of engagement, effectively, that, hey, look, we understand that you have technology that is based on the crash saucer at Roswell. We wanted to have an even playing field, so we gave the same technology to the Soviets. And you're not allowed to use that technology on your own population. You're not allowed to use that technology on any population on Earth, and you're not allowed to acquire any more technology beyond that which you have already gotten from us. That being said, that if one nation does somehow like get another crashed saucer, in general, that technology will spread to the other trilateral nations. But that being said, in the timeline that you have in Redacted, since it talks about the 1950s, the United Kingdom detonates its first nuclear weapon in 1952 and becomes a member of the Trilateral Treaty. So it's an increasingly inappropriately named Trilateral Treaty between three parties, because more and more nations slowly come under its umbrella.
One of the things I do like that you guys did mention Canada, which I thought was really nice, how we got in under Britain, and I want to say 1952. One of the things I do want to talk about, because this is something that I talked about off air, and because, like I said, this originally began as a minis war game, but now you've transferred it into a role-playing game. And I know, Al, you've worked on games like Once Upon and Sentience and stuff like that. And you have this system called Threshold, which I like how it uses D12s, because you don't see those used too often often on their own. It's always the infamous D20 or the D6 or whatever. So explain threshold to me and why that works particularly well with this game setting and the stories that it wants to tell.
I mean, so the threshold system was just originally created by me because I wanted to use D12s. I wanted to bring some respect. I wanted to be able to manipulate target numbers on a dice that you're rolling. And I thought that was a cool new way to look at, successes when you're rolling dice. So essentially, you have an attribute. Your attribute tells you how many D12s you're rolling in your pool. You roll an 11, it counts as a success. If you roll a 12, it counts as 2 successes. Simple as that. However, we also have our competencies, which are basically like your skills. And if you are trained in what it is that you are doing, you actually make it lower your threshold on your die that you need for a success. So if you have a level 1 in communication and you're trying to talk down a bad guy, you would actually take that D12 from an 11 down to a 10 for a success. And so that's why we call it threshold, because that target number is always moving on the D12s. And that's across the entire pool. So you can get multiple successes in a pool. And we took a little bit from the 2D20 system in that we have edits. And edits are things you get if you get more successes than the difficulty of the task that you're doing. Much in the same way that 2D20 uses momentum and things like that. The other thing is there's no hit points in the system at all. Instead, there are problems. And because we want to be narrative forward with Redacted, problems give you things that you can role play. So like each attribute that you have has 2 problems associated with it. So brains you could be confused or you could be inhibited, right? Your bronze, you could be injured or you could be weakened. Your coordination, you could be restrained or distracted. And your instinct you could be detached or you could be worried. And what happens is if you get hit by an attack or something goes poorly, you start filling in those problems. Well, when you go to make a test with that particular attribute, you tick down your target number for your competency, but then you have to tick back up that target number according to your problems. So no hit points in the game, but we give you story points. So like if you are confused, that gives you something to role play moving forward. And because we wanted to focus on story first, supported by the action, we thought that was a really good fit here.
One of the things that I did kind of notice, and this just may be how I'm interpreting it, because this is very narrative, it does have some crunch to it. And the fact that you don't have hit points, the source material very much leans into that. Because I've listened to Aaron's podcast, Earth versus Soup, where he looks at like movies from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And the body counts are generally not very high in those movies. So I like the fact that with this game, it does simulate those movies of that era, because I'm only really starting to get into those type of movies now, just because I'm curious, because my view of older sci-fi is very, very limited. Aaron's sort of been my Jedi master, say, hey, Mike, you should check this out. And when I read your game, I'm thinking, I kind of like that. I don't feel like this is Call of Cthulhu or one wrong roll and you're toast.
Yeah. I definitely did not want that at all. Yeah.
Right. If you fill up all your problems within a particular attribute, you are eliminated until you can get things fixed up. But for the most part, we wanted to keep the story moving forward. That's also why we introduced the persevere mechanic. So essentially, if you roll no successes in your pool at all, you can persevere. Persevere will add 1 success to your pool, but you have to suffer a problem in order to do it. So you have to tell me, how did you push yourself to overcome what happened in order to be successful? So that's another way that you can tack on those problems to your character as you're narratively describing how you reacted to a situation.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the push mechanic from the Aliens RPG, though yours is a lot more forgiving. Yeah, I thought so.
That's actually where I took it from. I play Tales from the Loop, so that was one of the things that I really, really loved about that. Is that you could give yourself successes and re-roll your misses and things like that. So persevering is very, very cool in the game.
So when you were working on Redacted, like I said, you've got your setting, you've got your lore. When you started digging into basically when you're making a game, I asked this question off air. So I would love to hear, well, when you look at what does a campaign look like to you guys? Like, do you see this more as a convention game, long term? If you were to write adventures this, because there is a adventure in this book, it's called the day before discovery, I want to say, or something like that.
Days Before Discovery, yeah.
Yeah, Days Before Discovery. So when you're planning out these games, how do you see this? Because like I know for Star Trek Adventures, for example, there was the Living campaign that was the Shackleton Expanse, and that was like 12 adventures. When you put together stories for this game, how many sessions do you see to complete an arc for something like that? Because I know for like D&D, it's like your ideal sessions should be like 5 or 6. Call Cthulhu, they're smaller and shorter, stuff like that. How do you see campaign design working for game masters in this world?
Well, to me, I always I approached Redacted as though it was like X-Files, a series of X-Files, that you could have a long-term campaign of, however long you want to play, because there might be an overarching story arc, but there can also be bottle episodes and standalone episodes, monster of the week kind of things that your agents are having to deal with. So, it can be long-term, but it also can be campaign, like a convention story with these really large adventures that we're publishing in the book. But yeah, Ellie, if you want to talk about some of your ideas.
I mean, I think that was kind of our goal, right? Was to have like short adventures that could be done in 4 hours, that could be single sessions that tell a cool story, and those could be standalone. And at the same time, having the options out there for these overarching stories. And in fact, in this year, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have our first full campaign out, which we're hoping to have like 8 or so adventures in there. And that will be a big story arc, but they don't need to be played sequentially, right? You could throw in a couple of these one-shot episodes along the way, just like they would during X-Files, right? X-Files, you wouldn't see the alien episodes except for maybe the season finale, the mid-season finale, and that would be it. So that's kind of what we were going for. We want there to be big, longer arcs, but also you can have these little fun episodes thrown in between as well. And that's why we kind of put in our mission briefs that we took the idea from Jim Johnson. I think we have like 8 mission briefs in here that can all just be very quickly built into full episodes of whatever story you're trying to tell.
Now, for those of my listeners that aren't familiar with the mission brief concept, what are those?
So mission briefs are these high level outlines, essentially, where we tell you who's the bad guy, what's going on. Here are 3 acts of a story that you can tell. And then here's what the finale might look like. We're not going to go in there and give you character stats. We're not going to give you, what the tests are that the players are going to have to go through. But we're giving you this high level outline of an adventure that you as a GM could then take it, and run with it.
Now, one of the questions I would love to ask you too. So when you're looking at building your character, building your campaign, you have a certain group of selectable, playable species and antagonist people. Now, I will admit my UFO lore is really weak in like recent years. I haven't kept up with the community, so to speak. You guys have you can play as a person, which is obvious. You can play as a reticulan, aka a gray, an android, and a goblin? Explain that one to me. Like, what's the origin of the Hopkinsville goblin?
It's a sighting from Hopkinsville, Kentucky. It's where the term little green men actually comes from. But it's a really cute today, but I'm sure it was terrifying at the time, encounter with these little glowing goblin-like creatures with big ears, and they glowed green. And they effectively came at this family's house in the middle of nowhere, Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and the family opened fire at them with like multiple rifles, shotguns, and every time that the goblins got hit, they'd giggle and float away, and seemingly being unhurt. And hundreds and hundreds of rounds of ammunition were expended being fired at these goblins. And finally, the family went out and got the sheriff. The sheriff came back, saw these shell casings everywhere, and was like, obviously they saw something, because no one's going to shoot up their own house like this. And then the sheriff left saying, hey, there's no evidence of anything. And then they came back. The Hopkinsville goblins came back and started peering through windows, knocking on doors. Well, anyway, the point is that the Hopkinsville goblins, in at least the Redacted universe, were just looking for a phone to try to contact somebody to fix their spaceship. And they're unharmed by bullets because they eat metal. And they thought that the family was just being friendly, delivering them food. That's the gag, that like, hey, look, this is an actual sighting that did happen. But hey, these things are friendly. There aren't that many of them because they're very rare. No one knows where really they came from, and they don't know how to get back home. So they've decided to work for the human treaty agencies.
Okay, so we've got that. You have androids, and I'm guessing that's based on stuff like Klaatu and Gort and stuff like that, right?
Yes, but more humanoid-ish, more human-passing ones, yes. But there's lots of 1950s movies that have humanoid robots or like replicant-type characters that are exploring humanity or trying to figure out how to destroy humanity or Earth, one of the two. But yeah, at least the androids that are in Redacted are ones that are generally friendly to humanity or have broken away from their hostile creators.
Now, speaking of hostile creatures in this, you guys have a whole interesting bestiary. My favorite being Killer Squirrel, which I would love to turn that into a campaign level threat. What are some of the antagonists you can expect to fight in Redacted, and why were these particularly chosen? Like, I'm very interested in wondering how, because I've always had this impression, from what I understand of UFO lore, of the aliens known as the Nordics being super friendly. But you guys have kind of twisted that idea on its head, thinking, we're fooling you. And I just love to know, where did this idea come from?
Oh, that's a really complex thing to answer easily, because as you know, UFO lore is very convoluted. But the point is that you have, if we're going to go back to like the core of it, you have Madame Blavatsky, who is like a Russian mysticism type person, who started talking about like Atlanteans and this idea of Aryans, and this is all tied into Nazi occultism and all of that. But the point is that a lot of the contactee movement in the 1950s encountered these blonde-haired, blue-eyed aliens that often talked about how they were from Atlantis or were Aryan in the classic Blavatsky sense. And why not tie it into the fact that they are kind of like tied to the Nazis and occultism? Yeah, they're preaching peace and kindness, but hey, you have to listen to us if you want to have that peace and kindness. You have to do what we want you to do. You need to make sure your governments fall, so there is no nuclear war or nuclear weapons. You have to disarm, and we'll rule you with our religion and our way of thinking. It's a slight twist on the whole contactee movement of the 1950s.
I thought that was unbelievably brilliant, especially and then there's like a name called, they're like the Stern Reich, like the Star Reich. I'm thinking that is really kind of clever,
because those are the SS that escaped at the end of the war with the help of the Space Brothers. Yeah,
and I'm thinking that's really interesting, because I can't remember, there was like, I think the movie's called like Iron Sky, and there's like space Nazis in it or something.
Yeah, like, it's basically that. It's basically that. But it's your classic Nazi saucer stuff at the end of the war, and mixed with Nazi occultism and Blavatsky stuff. Yeah.
That's really, really neat. So I guess as we begin to kind of wrap things up here, what is the future of Redacted? Basically, we've got the 50s, but we all know UFOs get really weird going up to the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like most of the stuff I know, I grew up on a television show called Sightings. God, I miss that show. And it gets weird. So are we going to see stuff like Dulcie bass from the 1970s? Are we going to see more like cattle mutilations and all sorts of bizarre
geez.
stuff? Please.
Well, you know,
tell
cattle
me.
mutilation started in the 1950s.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean, it did. It was kind of rare. They peaked in the 70s and 80s. See, I know way too much of this stuff. And I actually have a joke that I was a quick story that I was riding on a train actually in Canada out of the Sioux on a nice trip going up to a waterfall that was north of Sault Ste. Marie. And I had a whole like 500-page color print thing about the history of cattle mutilations. And there were this one guy was walking down the alleyway, like the aisle of the train that we were on. And I had this book out, and there was it was a gruesome picture of like one of these cattle being tore open, and he just kind of stopped and looked at me going, "What the hell are you reading?" And I'm like, "Oh, cattle mutilations." And yeah, he got freaked out. But anyway, 1950s, we have a lot planned. Al's already talked about our first campaign setting. Well, campaign guide, I should say, which I can say the name, right?
I mean, so our first expansion is going to be a 1950s source book to drill into a little bit deeper into the events that happened in the 1950s. That manuscript is done. It's getting ready to be put into layout. I'm hoping Q1 of this year we will see it. And then hopefully in the fall, we have an entire campaign that we're calling Year of the Cryptid. And that is going to kind of tell this overarching story about basically transdimensional shenanigans with the cryptids and things like that. So we're really excited to get those adventures going.
Are we going to be able to fight shadow people? Just say yes, please.
Well, I don't have anything about the shadow people purposely firmly written down, but I can say that I have notes about the black-eyed children.
Oh, wow. That's a deep cut. I was not I'm sorry. That is genuine excitement right there. This is gonna, I am genuinely excited for you guys. Like the fact that this, I think, is such a unique world you two have built, the fact that the narrative, like you can, like Al, your system you can teach in like 5 minutes. Yep. And I think that's the strength of the Threshold system, at least from what I've read so far. Like ultimately, guys, I think you've got a fantastic product. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys have with your first campaign setting and what happens beyond that.
I will give you a teaser. You have 2 playable species in the Year of the Cryptid, one of which is Changeling, and the second of which is Sasquatch.
Oh man, we are gonna be weird, and I love it. It's like Men in Black, but cooler. I'm so in, guys. This is exciting stuff. Guys, thank you for taking time out of your exceptionally busy writing schedule. So I will let you get back to Majestic HQ and get out there with our Reticulan Overwatch, or maybe the person from the 10th Directorate. But I appreciate it, guys. So once again, guys, thank you for joining us here on This Week in Geek.
Thanks for having us.
All right, guys, so that was my interview with Al Spader and Aaron Pollyea. Guys, please check out their book, Redacted. I know you can get this on DriveThruRPG if you want to grab it over there. Also, look up The Yellow Hand. When you just type that into Google, you'll be able to find more information that way. And check out the minis game this is based upon. Like I said, it's not my jam, but maybe it's yours. But I think you could easily find a way to combine these into one amazing campaign setting. Hey, if they can do it in Dungeons & Dragons with Dragon Lance and do the War of the Lance and do the RPG at the same time, you can do it too. So anyway, guys, we will be back full-time here on the show on January 26th is when me and Alex are planning on coming back. That'll be 19 years of Twig, if you can believe that. This podcast is now old enough to go to war, buy pornography, and in Canada, buy alcohol. So yeah, party times ahead. So anyway, guys, I'm going to get back to my vacation, but I will be seeing you all real soon. Otherwise, the Men in Black are coming to your house. Anyway, guys, I've been Mike the Birdman saying, be excellent to each other. We'll catch you guys again next time, right here on thisweekingeek.net.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
Lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.